Mascot Madness. Sarah Gibson is back in studio with another weird and wonderful mascot segment. Hot and cold, the soccer teams are starting off their seasons on opposite sides of the spectrum. And is the banged up Big Ben a blessing? Our reporters will debate on what losing Roethlisberger means for the Steelers. It's time to come on down to the Pioneer Sideline. Good evening and welcome to the Pioneer Sideline. I'm Allison Schubert. At the starting line of this week's episode is cross country. Kiera Fry joins us in studio to keep us up to date on how both teams have been so far this season. Kiera, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start out. We haven't really covered cross country as much on Sideline so far. How have both of the teams been doing?
Both of the teams have been doing pretty well so far this season. They've only had two meets, the Bethany Invitational first, and then they were at Lock Haven this past weekend. The women finished 4th at the Bethany Invitational, and they finished 15th at Lock Haven, and the men's team finished 8th at the Bethany Invitational and 11th at Lock Haven this past weekend. So they're doing pretty well thus far, and they seem to be working together as a team to rack up those points and place pretty high.
So obviously Anna Shields was a name that we were very familiar here at Sideline with, and kind of all over campus. She was our local celebrity. Obviously she graduated. She is no more here at Point Park. How have the women been doing, and who has been stepping up there in her absence?
So the biggest key person on the women's team right now is Alyssa Campbell. She's a sophomore. She's been doing really well. She was actually honored with the Women's River State Conference Runner of the Week after their first meet, where she finished 3rd. And then this past weekend, she finished 11th, and she led the women to finish in the 11th place overall.
And then switching over to the men's side, Xavier Stevens is a really big name, but who's been running alongside him so far?
Xavier has definitely been leading the men's team, but honestly, the men's team, their top 5 is really strong. At Lock Haven, all of the top 5 finished within 28 minutes for their race, and specifically Brody Carlin, Doug Kostelinski, Brian Gutierrez, and Carlos Polanco have been doing really well. They all finished in 27:30 or less, I believe it was.
That's pretty impressive for that men's team. Now, Spisak was named the official head coach over the summer. How has he kind of integrated himself in these teams? How has he been doing with them?
I think he's been doing really well with the coaching. You saw kind of a shift in how their practices are going. They're doing a lot more regular long distance running, where they have the teams running longer than what their actual distance races are, which they hadn't really done under Coach Kelly Parsley. So I think that that's definitely helped with build their endurance, so that when they do get into these races and they aren't running as far as they are used to in practice, it's actually allowing them to go faster and keep up their stamina.
So, predictions. Do you think this team will be as successful in what I like to call the post-Shields era?
I think that the men's team will do really well still, obviously, because she wasn't on that team. But for the women, I think they're going to struggle a little bit, because there is a big gap between Alyssa Campbell and their next top 5. So I think as long as they keep working on the long distance practices, they could get back up to being close to what they were with Anna Shields. But I think they are going to be lacking a little bit this season.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kiera. But before we head to break, Sarah Gibson is back in studio with her bi-weekly segment, Mascot Mania. Sarah, what weird, wacky, and wonderful mascots do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Allison, and welcome to Mascot Mania, the place for all your mascot news. While we are several months away from the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo, today I'd like to talk about the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. The 2022 Winter Olympics have finally revealed 2 new mascots for the event: a giant panda named Bing Duen Duen, and a walking Chinese lantern named Shui Rong Ron. Bing Bing Duen will represent the Olympics, and Shui Ron Ron will represent the Paralympics. And while I think they're both excellent candidates for the job, some were not impressed by choosing a panda mascot to represent the games, as a giant panda was also one of the 5 mascots used for the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. so it looks like Bing Duen Duen has some big shoes to fill. And of course, what kind of senior mascot correspondent would I be if I did not mention that today is the first birthday, might I add, of Gritty, the inarguably most memed member of the Philadelphia Flyers. Yes, it was 1 year ago when Gritty made his debut and shook the mascot industry to his core. And of course, this brings us to our mascot of the week, the Evergreen State Gooey Duck. A gooey duck is a clam whose body is always too large for its tiny shell. The Evergreen State College website has tons of fun facts about these bizarre bivalvian creatures. They even boast about how their mascot has been voted several times the worst in the world. And while I don't have time for it, they also have a gooey duck fight song that I highly recommend listening to. Alrighty, folks, that's all we have time for. Back to Allison at the desk.
Sarah, this has quickly become my favorite segment, and I love all of the research that you do to put into that. But when we return, our reporters will give us the details on both the men's and women's soccer team as conference play approaches. We'll be right back.
Go. Go to our new website, uview.plainpark.edu. Go, 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 go.
Join UView and find your herd.
Be like, join EOP. And 3, 2, join EOP.
I was just saying, grab them now, or else I can listen.
Yeah.
Join On Point with Politics. 3, 2, 1.
Join Pioneer Sideline.
Loneliest number that you'll ever do.
Welcome back. The women's soccer team has had a rough go of things so far this season, but River State's conference play is just around the corner. To break the season down so far, we bring in Trevor Ulichny. Trevor, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
So, just to start off, how are the games this week?
So the Plain Park women's soccer team, they lost on Tuesday, September 17th to Shawnee State University. It was a pretty even game. Most through the shots ended up being 13-12 in favor of Shawnee State, but Plain Park University came a little bit up short with a final score of losing 2-1. Shawnee State scored the first goal, and then Plain Park tied it up at the 57th minute on a penalty kick, and Shawnee State, although, would end up coming out with a victory in a very, very close game.
All right, and what about that game against Madonna?
They would lose 8-0. It was a very dominating performance by Madonna University. The shots were 15-14 in the end of the first quarter, but Plain Park would only be down 1-0.
So, even though these games don't result in wins for Point Park, what positivity can they bring out of them?
Well, most specifically in the Shawnee State University game, they stayed with them through and through. Shot-wise, gameplay-wise, it was very, very close. So I think they can look at it as they're keeping up with their opponents, but they just need to get back on track, and maybe it's more of a mental game.
So something we didn't see last year that we're starting to see now is Taylor Goldstrom's getting some time in goal, kind of giving Ashton Webb a break here and there. Do you think that'll be a regular occurrence going into the rest of the season?
I think it will. I think they want to see what they have in Taylor Goldstrom as wise, because once Ashton Webb is out of here and gone, they're going to need a goaltender. And Taylor Goldstrom is their only line of defense. And now with these games, as they're 1-6, these are the kind of times where you experiment with what you have for the future instead of putting out there in the line with the players you have now.
Now, Coach Moreski still seems to be pretty optimistic about this season, and it is just preseason right now, so I'm curious to see what they're going to have through conference play, but do you think we'll see more of the same lines, or do you think we'll start to see them kind of light it up as the season goes on?
It's hard to tell as of right now. I mean, like I said, they're 1-6. They seem to be in a really rough funk that they can't get out of. I think with that said, I think they'll experiment with some different lines and some different line combinations. And like I said, how Taylor Goldstrom is playing over Ashton Webb. So I think they're going to experiment with some things, and we'll see how it ends up turning out for them.
And then finally, Trevor, who are the opponents you're worried most about in the conference?
Asbury University and IU East are the two of the top teams in the conference, right behind Point Park. So I think those are going to be their two top challenges so far.
All right, and I agree with you, Trevor. Thank you very much. On the opposite side of things, we have the men's team, who has continued their dominance on the field so far. So for some additional analysis on that men's team and how they've been doing, we bring in Taylor Spirito. Taylor, thank you for joining me at the desk as always.
Of course, Allison.
So just to start off things, kind of the same way as Trevor, how'd the men do this week?
So the men actually did really, really well this week. They had a game on Wednesday. It was a 4 p.m. start against Ohio Valley. They're the number 7 ranked team in NCAA Division II. And they ended up shutting them out 2-0 with goals from Roos and Rel. They had an absolutely amazing game. I was on the call for it, and it was just such a fun game to watch. You know, you just cheered for them through and through, and they put up such a good game, even when Ohio Valley was starting to push back after they went down 2-0. Like, it was just, they kept with it, and they pulled out a really great win against Ohio Valley.
Now, this team has been so fun to watch so far. From their spirits and their style of gameplay, I've had such a great time following them. But it's kind of a dangerous point because one loss can send them into a funk. So do you think that they're going to be able to keep their spirits up, or do you think that they're going to fall victim to that one loss and you're out kind of thing?
Like you said, this team is so fun to watch. And they haven't lost since September 1st against Lincoln College. Since then, they've won 7-0 against Penn State Greater Allegheny. They've won 11-0 against Penn State Beaver, which that was an absolutely incredible game. And then 2-1 against Washington Adventist, and then 2-0 against Ohio Valley. So this team isn't used to losing. And I don't see them having at least a blowout loss in the future. In the near future at least. So I think if anything, that would be the thing to get their spirits down, is to get shut out or to have a game go against them that's, say, 7-0, 11-0. But again, I don't see that happening. And I think a 1-goal game, a 2-goal game that they drop, I don't think that's going to do enough to get these guys' spirits down.
Now, as you just said, there are a lot of things going for this team. But what do you think is their fatal flaw as it stands right now?
So one thing that you notice in the Ohio Valley game was that they had no substitutions throughout the entire first half. They did sit some of their starters, like Kai Invitin. He didn't play until the end of the game, or like I think it was the last 15 minutes where he came in. But I'm scared that those starters, especially in the beginning of the Ohio Valley game, I fear that they're going to get overworked. Toward the end of that game, you could see some of them getting winded. Some of them are coming off with injuries and didn't come back. So I'm scared that they are going to overwork themselves, you know, try to push themselves to the very, very limit and then not be able to come back from that. And they've got a 10-day break between last Wednesday's game and their next game on the 28th. So I think that, you know, with being overworked that much and that 10-day break, somewhere in there's got to be some sort of bad connection that I would hate to see them find.
Now, with a team that doesn't have as much depth, has anybody else stepped up? You've mentioned Kai, who got a little bit of a rest. We've talked about Vessel Reitveld, who's been killing it since he came back from his injury. But has anybody else kind of risen to the challenge?
So I actually had written down on here, you know, Vessel Reitveld. He has been doing absolutely incredible. Like you said, missed last season, came back to score 2 goals in his first game back. But other than that, I think that the 2 guys that scored the goals in the Ohio Valley game, Jonathan Roos and Mitchell Rel, I think they're really stepping it up. You could see that their presence was so known on that field, especially Mitchell Rel. His speed is so dominant on that field, and he's not even the biggest guy out there. But as soon as he gets going, he outruns everyone that's trying to catch him. And you can see the amount of effort that he's putting in and how much it's paying off.
And he already has 5 goals this season, so he's performing offensively as well as getting that speed in there. And finally, we'll end with this. Just as somebody who follows the team a little closer than I do, what are some of your predictions for conference play?
So I think that if they keep the ball rolling the way that they have, I don't think conference play is going to be as big of a threat as it has been in the past. We talk a lot about how, you know, the Point Park men's soccer team has always made really early exits within the playoffs, and they did not come deserved. I think that if any year is going to be the one where they break out of it, it's going to be this one. I don't foresee a first-round exit. Hopefully I didn't jinx it, but I don't foresee that happening. They've got great talent both between the pipes and on the field, defensively and offensively. And like I said, if any year is going to be the year to get it done, it's going to be this one.
Well, excellent analysis as always, Taylor. Thank you very much. When we come back, we'll get an update on both the regional and national sports headlines from this week. Don't go anywhere.
What's one word to describe CAB?
Welcoming.
Community.
Creative.
Experiences.
Family. Openness.
Pineapple.
The Campus Activities Board is a student-run organization that consists of 7 different committees. Each focuses on event planning, marketing, and administrative activities. Join us in organizing the juiciest events on campus, from late-night bingo to festive dances to our team bonding meetings. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Point Park Cap, or like us on Facebook at Campus Activities Board at Point Park University.
Good evening and welcome to Newsnight. I'm Josh Troop alongside Jess Paterchak.
Defending his decision to kick out 15 Cuban diplomats from the United States.
Thanks, Allison. Fitness on Demand has returned to Point Park.
Residents fear that Mount Agung will have a repeat of 1963's eruption.
2-star NFL quarterbacks made the headlines this week after wrapping up.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. That's your news tonight. For Nick Tomarello, I'm Alex Grubbs. Have a great night.
Welcome back. The Steelers have had a less than stellar start to the season, and the Pirates have concluded theirs much in the same way. Colton Tobias joins us for all of our regional sports news. Colton?
Thank you so much, Allison. The Steelers' trip to the West Coast was one the team and fans would wish to forget, as they fell to the San Francisco 49ers 24-20, as the Steelers now fall to 0-3. The Steelers' defense was on explosive mode in the first half as they racked up 4 turnovers. But the offense was non-existent as they were only able to get 2 field goals off those turnovers, as it was a 6-3 game at halftime. The game that went back and forth with a lot more offense for both teams, but a late 49ers touchdown after a fumble from James Conner sealed the Steelers' fate, as they will come back to Pittsburgh to play the also winless Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. There was a football silver lining in the Steel City, however, as the Pitt Panthers defeated the 15th-ranked University of Central Florida Knights 35-34. Pitt started off the game stronger than ever as they took a 21-0 lead early. However, UCF went on an explosion of their own as they scored 24 unanswered points to take the lead halfway through the third quarter. It then went back and forth the rest of the way, but it was Pitt who would prevail on a play by Kenny Pickett, which is now known as the Pitt Special. Pitt would go on to win, handing UCF its first regular season loss since November 26 of 2016. And the season for the Pirates is coming to an end this week as they conclude the season with 2 3-game series against the Cubs and Reds at PNC Park. The Pirates are currently on a 9-game losing streak and are on pace to finish last in the NL Central. But the good news is hockey season is right around the corner as the Penguins will host the Red Wings tomorrow night at PBG Paints Arena for another preseason matchup.
Thanks, Colton. We were struck with the news of Big Ben's departure last week, but what other backup quarterbacks have been making headlines? Plus, the NHL season is right around the corner, but some free agents still remain. For more, we turn things over to Ray Hazenstab with our national news. Ray?
Thank you, Allison. The Antonio Brown saga may finally be over. Brown was released by the New England Patriots on Friday after spending 11 days on the roster and playing in their Week 2 game. This release comes after being accused of multiple cases of sexual assault. Brown has stated he will not play in the NFL anymore. However, there have been teams interested in picking up the wide receiver. The NFL is investigating the claims and will not place him on the commissioner's exempt list at this time. In other news from the NFL, the week was full of storylines, among others the 8 teams that were starting quarterbacks from the depth chart. Aside from Steelers backup Mason Rudolph, who we already mentioned, Backup Gardner Minshew led the Jaguars to a 27-7 victory. Panthers backup Kyle Allen led the Panthers to a 38-20 victory. Saints backup Teddy Bridgewater propelled the Saints to a win. Daniel Jones replaced Eli Manning and led the Giants to a nail-biting 32-31 last-minute win, and now starter Jacoby Brissett led the Colts to a 27-24 win. And in the big news from the week, third-string quarterback Luke Falk got his first taste of the action in a 30-14 loss to New England. Baseball season is wrapping up and only a few slots remain for October baseball. Currently, the Astros, Yankees, Dodgers, Cardinals, and Braves have clinched their spots for October by winning their divisions. The only division left to crown a champion is the AL Central, which is currently led by the Minnesota Twins. The AL wild card is a three-team race between the Athletics, Rays, and Indians. In the meanwhile, the AL wild card is a lot more open, with the Brewers, Nationals, Cubs, Mets, Phillies, and Diamondbacks all looking to punch their ticket. It's a race to the finish, so buckle up. And the NHL season is right around the corner, but some big names still remain unsigned. Mikko Rantanen, Patrick Laine, and Matthew Tkachuk are the biggest names that are still restricted free agents, and negotiations have been hit or miss, let's say. The deadline these players can be signed by is December 1st, and there's been little word on what progress has been made for each of the players. That's all I have for National. Let's head back to Allison at the desk.
Thanks, Ray. After the break, it's everyone's favorite segment, Case of the Week. We'll be right back.
The United Student Government at Point Park University, working since the 1970s to solve the issues that matter to you. What concerns do you have about the university? Student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. The United Student Government, by the students, for the students.
The Point Park Sports Network, bringing you live coverage of Pioneer Athletics on Stretch Internet, the home of the River States Conference and the NAIA. Subscribe today for complete access to the Point Park volleyball, baseball, basketball, and soccer teams. Watch live and on-demand broadcasts, and don't miss a minute of Point Park Athletics. Head to pointparksports.com/live for broadcast listings. The Point Park Sports Network, your streaming home for Point Park Athletics.
3, 2, 1.
Please visit our website. Please, it's a nice website. Please visit our website. Please.
If you have ever watched television, whether accidentally or on purpose, YouView is for you.
Welcome back. This week's Case of the Week, how will Big Ben's absence affect the Steelers? To debate, we bring in Taylor Sprito, Colton Tobias, Trevor Ulichny, and Kenneth Foran. Guys, just down the line, let's start off. Will he be missed?
I mean, I think in Pittsburgh he's going to be missed. It's Big Ben. He's the last remaining of the big three, between Bell, Brown, and Ben.
The Killer Bees.
Absolutely. So I think that Pittsburgh is going to miss him. I'm not quite sure how this team is going to miss him. I mean, Rudolph has been stepping up despite the 0-3 record that they have, and I'd love to see what he's going to do for the rest of the season.
Colton?
This team is going to miss him big time. I know that there's a lot of hype with Mason Rudolph, but I think he still has a lot to prove. I mean, he hasn't even won a game yet, and I think people are already calling him the next big thing. I think he has a lot to prove, and I think Ben is going to be really missed here because I think the Steelers are going to miss the playoffs because of his absence.
Trevor?
I agree with Colton. They're definitely going to miss Big Ben. And facts of leadership, as a veteran on this team, he's been here the longest out of anybody on this team so far. And Mason Rudolph hasn't improved himself yet, hasn't even won a game. I mean, he's definitely looking good as of right now, but he has a lot to prove.
Kenneth?
I think memory-wise, the city of Pittsburgh is going to miss Big Ben. I mean, I personally have a lot of great childhood memories of how successful the Steelers were back in the day, but honestly, I think it's been overdue for a change in the roster. And, I mean, with age comes sort of that declining talent. So while we may have seen the last of Big Ben, I feel like it's for the best.
So you guys kind of touched on Mason Rudolph a little bit, and Pittsburghers have a tendency to kind of jump on things. But just kind of early preview of Mason Rudolph. What do we think? I know you think he doesn't live up to the hype just now, but do you think there is hype? Like, do you think he deserves some at least?
Oh, yeah, like I'm not trying to bash Mason Rudolph at all, Allison. I mean, I think he's a great quarterback. I mean, he had 2 touchdown passes against San Francisco. He was 14 to 27 with 174 yards. So I think that the potential is there, but if the Steelers want any chance of making the playoffs, I mean, they basically have to go 13-3 the rest of the season, and that is not going to be easy at all. And does Mason Rudolph have it in him, to do that? I don't know. We'll see. But, I mean, the Steelers have a lot of division games left. I mean, they still got to play the Rams on teams. But, I mean, we'll just have to see.
I feel like any Pittsburgh Steelers fan is going to look at Mason Rudolph and say, well, that's not Big Ben. Like, that's just how it is. We're so used to having him. And the fact that we don't anymore is just like that bittersweet feeling. Like, you know that, he's getting old and that, his prime is pretty much past, but it's still like you want him there. He's Big Ben.
He's that comforting feeling. He's like the person we all grew up with is Big Ben. So it's like, Big Ben.
It's like, now what do you do when he's gone?
Exactly. Thoughts on Mason Rudolph, Kenneth?
Well, kind of like we said, it's going to be hard to feel like, wow, Big Ben's not anymore. You're not going to see number 7 behind the center. But, I mean, every rookie does need that first year to really get through the whole process of the NFL and really like find themselves. So while I feel like obviously it is going to be very hard to go 13-3 for the rest of the season, I feel like now with Big Ben being out, I think you take this season and just try and use your new players and learn a little bit, get those draft picks up like they've been doing, and I feel like the future could look bright. Right now, maybe not so much, but I feel like they've got a really bright future.
So that's the future. Let's go back to Big Ben for a second. What's going to happen after he comes back? Do you think he will come back? Do you think his number might be retired for Steelers? What are we thinking about when he returns, if he returns?
So it has been revealed that he's not having Tommy John surgery. So he is just, he's expecting to come back for next season. I've read that like multiple different, WTAEs reported that, KDKA. He's expecting to come back. But I don't know how long that's going to last. Like I've said, his prime is well past. He hasn't looked as good as he has. And I think it is time to move on from him. I would love to see his number be retired. I can't picture another Pittsburgh Steeler wearing the number 7. But at this point, I think he could come back for next season. But even like in the middle of the season after that, I think this is going to be it for him.
Big Ben is going to come back, and he will be better than ever, I believe.
Bold.
I think
That's
so.
a bold statement.
There's a lot of haters out there that are doubting him. I mean, just because of his age. I mean, I don't think that makes much of a difference. I think he still has it in him. That's how I feel.
What about his number? You think it's going to be retired?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that. It's just because the Steelers just don't retire numbers too often.
I know, that's why.
The Steelers only have 2
Uh-huh.
numbers retired, so
Is Ben worthy of that?
I think he is. I mean, knowing all the times he's led them to the playoffs and the 2 Super Bowls, so I think he is worthy. But at the same time, I just don't think the Rooney's are going to do it.
Okay. What about you guys?
I believe Ben's number should be retired. And now, will it be retired? We don't know. As Colton said, they're not really well known for retiring numbers. Now, as Ben is coming back for next season, yes. Why? Because he's a very confident player. He's shown great leadership over the years. He's not going to go out on this note. He's going to go out the way he wants to go out. Mason Rudolph, I think Mason Rudolph is the future of the Steelers, but he has a lot to prove.
All right, Kenneth, what about you?
Mostly the same. I really think that, the way that Ben has like built himself up, he's not going to let this one injury like just completely end his career. Like he'll definitely try and come back. Whether or not they have a successful season with him next year, that's still kind of up in the air. Again, with surgery does come that rehabilitation. Obviously, it's not going to be as bad because he's not having Tommy John, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think that he's going to try and give it his all, but this could be his last shot to prove that he's really got what it takes.
I agree, Kenneth. I think this is going to be his last chance to come back from the surgery, see next season, and if things don't go his way. He's already had retirement rumors in the past, so I think after this next season, I think he's done. But thank you guys so much for coming on and talking about Big Ben with me. That is all we have time for this week. Be sure to join us next week at the same Pioneer time, the same Pioneer channel, and of course, the same Pioneer Sideline.